Trying to prove your worth causes all kinds of problems. It leads to things like depression, anxiety, addiction, self-rejection. It just doesn't work. Now, we fall into this trap. So many people are trying to prove themselves all the time. I'm going to show you why you fall into that trap, how not to get stuck in that trap, and where to actually truly find your worth. So listen to the end of this video because I'm going to walk you through that whole process. I had a client years ago that would do everything that I told him to do. He was so consistent. He was so good. He seemed like the best client. But there was a big problem. He would follow through. I could tell him to exercise 5 times a week. He'd do it. But he'd come in and meet with me every week and he'd say, "Brannon, look what I did. Look what I did. I did this, I did that. I did all these things." And I'd give him praise and I felt a little bit weird about it because he soaked in the praise so much. Behind the scenes, he was acting out in his addiction over and over again. He was numbing his life out. So this is what was happening, is he was trying to get his worth from me. He was trying to get validation from me. Yet deep, deep down, he felt horrible about himself and he was numbing his life out. Think about in your life how you tried to earn your worth. Do you try to be good enough to your boss? Or do you try to look good enough to your spouse or your friends? Do you try to impress people, make enough money, have big enough muscles, whatever you need to do so other people say, "Wow, you're amazing, you're valuable"? The more you're trying to get that worth from other people, the more you're actually feeding a narrative that that's where you get your worth. And it's an endless pit of destruction. The reality is you cannot get your worth from another person. Once I get blank, then I'll be enough. Once I make this much money, once I lose this much weight, once I get this certain job, then I'll be enough. The problem with that thinking is it's a deficiency model. There's always a deficiency. It's always saying to you, you need to do something to be okay. It's a constant self-rejection. It's not self-acceptance and self-compassion. I see this in different places. I see this with people who struggle with addiction all the time. Once I get sober enough, once my spouse loves me enough, then I'll be okay. Then my addiction won't rule the day. But the fact of the matter is their addiction persists if they're trying to get it from being sober enough or getting their spouse to love them enough. I see this all the time at church. At church, I see people who are always trying to prove themselves. If I'm good enough at church, if I magnify my callings at church and get more involved and be more righteous, then God will love me. Then my worth will be there. The problem is it never ends. Once I earn it, then I'll be worth it. The problem is you don't earn your worth. You can't earn your worth. You're already worth it. I want to talk to you about where I believe your worth actually comes from. But before I do, please comment below and talk about how you've struggled to find your worth, or maybe things you've done to try to earn it. I have 4 kids. My kids don't need to prove anything for me to love them. I love them anyways. Now, I want them to do good in their life. I want them to have good consequences and success and all kinds of goodness in their life. But whether they do or whether they don't, I still love them. Have you ever considered this? What if our worth is innate? What if it's already there? Now, you might be listening to this thinking, I'm an addict. I make mistakes. I've done all these horrible things in my life. My worth is not there inside of me. But what if it is? What if it can't be taken away? What if it's always been there? Instead of trying to get God's love by earning it, you actually find your worth by letting go. It's a paradox. Let go and let God. So what I mean by a paradox is it feels backwards. If I let go and I allow God to initiate me, to connect to me, to love me, then I'll feel God's love and I'll know that I have worth and value. If I'm always trying to prove myself, then I never stop and surrender. I want to challenge you for one day to notice how God loves you and how you have value versus trying to earn it. Now, what I mean is just pay attention to all the little ways that God is saying that you're loved. Maybe it's that bird chirping in the morning. Maybe it's your child smiling at you. Maybe it's that favorite song of yours coming on the radio that you haven't heard in a while. You can notice those things and realize you are seen, you are loved, and you are valued. I hate to tell you this, but in this life, you'll never be rich enough, you'll never be perfect enough, and you'll never be in the perfect shape of your life in order to get value. That does not exist. Enough is elusive. When you say, I want to be blank enough, it's elusive. You can never get it. So instead of trying to get it, practice self-acceptance and practice connection to God. I want to give you some examples of things that people do to try to earn their worth. One thing that people do is at work, they try to be good enough. So I've worked with a person before who I hired, and they were awesome. I was their boss. They did everything I told them to do. They always were available. They were working so hard. Yet I could tell that they always were worried that they weren't doing a good job. And so they worked really, really hard for me, but always felt inadequate. And something happened in the end. They actually felt some resentment toward me, toward the job. They got burned out. They didn't love the job because they felt like they never were getting what they were actually wanting. Now, I loved what they were doing, but I wish that they could have just accepted themselves and been okay with the job that they were doing. Another example is eating disorders and self-image. Getting to that place of, I have to look a certain way to be okay. And you look at an eating disorder, somebody who's actually starving themselves, they continue to starve themselves because they never feel like they're actually okay. Another example is at church, trying to be righteous enough. I don't know if you ever heard of scrupulosity. That's the word of the day, scrupulosity. But that is obsessive compulsive disorder that's centered around righteousness, being good enough, being okay. You get to a point where you have so much anxiety about it because you're worried that the wrath of God is going to come if you sin. So the more you try to be good enough, the more you reject yourself and don't feel good enough. So let's talk about what it looks like in reverse. For that girl that worked for me, instead of trying to prove herself all the time, she would own when she struggled. She would be open about the projects that she didn't want to do. She would talk openly with me. The thing about it is she would have been awesome at her job, and she still could have been authentic and vulnerable and open about the things that she struggled with. There wouldn't be that angst behind her, always trying to prove herself, and she'd have peace inside of herself. The person who has an eating disorder actually lets go of the need to get validation from others and feel okay about themselves. They can see that they're beautiful and that God loves them anyways, no matter how much they weigh. And because of this, they're not so focused on looking a certain way. The church one is actually my favorite example. Instead of trying to earn your worth, you actually connect to what God, what Jesus says about you, that you're okay exactly as you are. You let go and you let God. You fall into their arms where they can validate you and see you instead of constantly trying to prove yourself. That is an example of actually finding your worth. Trying to earn your worth does lead to addiction. It leads to wanting to numb your life out. If this video has been helpful, then check out my other video, Why Sex Addiction is Not About Sex.